All right, welcome to Cwic Show. In this episode, I just want to cover a couple of things that I'm seeing in the position that I'm in with so many emails and comments on the videos and on the podcast, and contact through my website from listeners and viewers. And there's a concern, I think, that should be out there for everybody in regards to the balance between politics and the gospel of Jesus Christ, between politics and the prophet and the brethren. And so I want to just talk a little bit about that. I'm concerned about some comments. I'm concerned about testimony. And there are people that are very concerned that are on the left. This has been something going much longer on the left, that they want to see a larger change, right? And so their testimonies are rocked a little bit because of their political views, that things aren't changing fast enough or at all for the direction that they're looking for to reconcile the church with their political beliefs. On the right, this is a little bit more recent, although it's happened in the past in the church. It's the same thing, right? You see, as I've done these episodes on these organizations under the church, right? Deseret News, the church news emails we've gone over recently, BYU, of course, that I've covered, Deseret Book. And so, I want to be clear. I am not criticizing the church, and I am not criticizing the brethren, right? And I think most people get that. I do. Right? My concern is for them. My concern is for the brethren. My concern is for the church. That's why I'm doing this. Because I see a pernicious ideology entering into the church at the ward level, in the communications department, and again, at BYU, Deseret News, Deseret Book, communications department, and so on, right? And so that's why I do this. But one of the reactions that comes up often is people on both sides of the aisle that are complaining about where the brethren are and where the church is and what they've said, and they're not, I try to be pretty clear on this. They're not parsing this out, and they can't get away from thinking that the brethren are making all of these mistakes and saying the wrong things and allowing things in. And I sustain the brethren and I sustain the church. You can do what you want. You can choose not to do that. But I do. And my message is built around that in fighting against internal problems that I see and helping to build up the church and support the brethren. That's what I'm doing. And I think sometimes we take, as I have in the title here of the episode, we take these ideas, especially coming from, TV news, where we are fed exactly what we want to hear. We can stay within our own bubbles politically, and we are given information that is to heighten our reaction against the other side. That is completely, to me, a sleight of hand. And so, if I'm on the right and I get all my information from Fox News and Breitbart and other types of media, it's not that I think that's bad, but if I'm consumed with that, and I'm emotionally and mentally tied to that above the gospel, I'm going to run into problems. I'm going to have conflicts. I'm going to have a cognitive dissonance that is going to arise. And on the left, if I'm focused on MSNBC and the Young Turks, or whoever else I'm pulling in from left-wing media, and that fuels me, and I can react and be mad at somebody. This is all on both sides, as we attach our emotion and our mental processes to this identity and to these affiliations. All we're doing is we're allowing others to stoke the fires of mimetic desire. That was pretty good. We're allowing others to stoke the fire of mimetic desire, where we coalesce around what can we all be angry at? What can we all be mad at? And that's an issue. That's a problem. We need to find specific issues, do what we think is right, and believe in those things, and make sure that our values and our identities are set in the right order. And instead of thinking necessarily, which I do get also, of course, thinking about the issues themselves and comparing them to the gospel, if I'm talking about the enemy on the other side more, then I think we're talking about a problem here, right? And that's why I try to distinguish between the extremes. The extremes are a problem on the left and the right. And the larger problem, yes, is the left right now, but it's not always that way. It hasn't always been that way. And anybody who is on the left right now, and there are many of them that are liberal, that are not protecting their left flank, they're checking the left flank of the radicals. That's a problem. It's a massive threat right now. Massive threat. But also on the right, if you're not checking the right, your right flank, the extreme level, then that is also going to end up being a large problem. It is not the same problem right now, right? The left owns the institutions. The left has won the culture war. You can see that real easily simply by saying who is for free speech more and who is not. Right? In the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, the right, they were not as concerned about free speech as the left was. I grew up in that period. I remember all the signs and the interviews and everybody talking about on the left, free speech, free speech, free speech. But they've won the culture war. And they are in every institution and have strongholds in those major institutions of education, of law, of media, of corporations, right? So it changes. So, but on the right, you're going to see growth there. You're going to see growth on the radical right. Why? Because the right reacts. If you think about how the left and the right work, the left has a DNA that goes back probably all the way to Rousseau, coming up through Kant, coming up through young Hegelian thought, and then these are the philosophers, and then up through Marx and Engels, and then especially in the U.S., coming up through critical theory in the Frankfurt School. Massive, massive influence on academia, especially Herbert Marcuse. And then we sprout out from there with critical race theory. Postmodernism is in many ways drawing from the ideas of critical theory, even though they push back on some things. So leftism and radical leftism pull from this DNA that means you hear certain words that are really fundamental to leftist thought. And those are critique, that we draw back from Kant, and then you can move all the way up to something like deconstruction with Derrida in postmodernism. And the idea is that we're breaking things down. We're breaking down systems. You hear a lot about systemic racism or systemic issues. What it really is we're going to break down the systems. We're going to break down the status quo. And there is a place for that as we move forward, in trying to be a better civilization and a better people. If we just sit at the status quo, which the right protects a little bit more, then there's a problem. You've got a structure that is in place that is not fluid to some degree, and where we get more creativity and ideas and improvement, right? On the other hand, the right, where they're protecting more of the status quo, and that's where you kind of get the idea, the name conservatism, right? You're conserving what has got a fortress around the status quo, but it's especially got a fortress around certain values. So when the left goes too far, what are they doing? They're not just breaking down ideas and trying to get more inclusivity, but when the left goes too far, when the radicals take charge, as they have, not completely, but in the institutions, they've got a very strong foothold there. They're working on government right now. They're working on religion as well. But when the left goes too far, they go into certain values that are fundamental and principles that are fundamental to civilization, that are fundamental to, I mean, we can call them even, success principles. We can call them principles that bring us into perpetuity and survival, that bring us into, and then even higher level, eternal principles. And so when the left creates that movement through we can kind of look through this idea of the Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? It's just this idea of moving forward through history and improvement. The problem is that if I start breaking down certain systems that are eternal principles, that are principles of success, like liberal democracy, because what are you going to replace that with? Like capitalism. It's not perfect. What are you going to replace it with? A lot more of Western civilization. What about reason, as you get, especially with postmodernism and out of critical theory also? There's this fight against the Enlightenment and science and reason as a whole. Everyone's got their own experience. There's no universal truth. That's the same idea as breaking down these truths. Well, I can break down certain things and then try and improve them, but other things, if I break them down, if I deconstruct them, if I critique them to the point of damaging them and having them collapse, I've got real issues. You've got real issues. We've got societal issues that are so damaging. We can see this in the 20th century through Lenin and Stalin and Pol Pot, and so there's a place for both of these things. But if we're tied so strongly to them, and we let others influence us, and instead of just saying one by one, I'm going to take this issue and I'm going to think about it, I'm going to reason about it, I might even pray about it. Instead of saying I'm going to identify with a specific political party above my membership in the church, above my relationship with God, above my support for the prophet, that's what we're moving into here. It's concerning. And I get these messages saying, I don't believe in the brethren anymore, or, I don't trust them, or this is a big mistake, I think, a really big mistake. There's also the problem of being moderate. You see a large group of people that are smart individuals in the church that believe that civility and being moderate is the highest value. And so there's no fight in them to support eternal principles because they're anti-conflict. No, we can be diplomatic about everything, and they become what the scriptures, denote as lukewarm. They're neither hot nor cold. And I see a lot of that growing in a certain faction of the church today. I don't understand it. Look at each value. Don't put being moderate and civil as the very highest value. Yes, we want to be civil. But moderate is not, I mean, yes, if you're staying away from the extremes and you're calling that moderate, okay, I guess. But being lukewarm is not the right idea. And I think that we ought to be looking at issues individually, each individual issue, and decide how we're going to, be an activist for it, or we're going to vote on it, how we're going to encourage or influence others on that issue. But being lockstep in with an identity that's so strong with a political party is I think I don't think it's the smartest thing to do with our identity. We have identity politics that are not going just into race and all these intersectional identities such as sexual orientation and citizenship and ableism and singleism and all these different areas of intersectionality. But now we're throwing in there oftentimes political affiliation, our political identity. The brethren are very careful to put up our identity here at the top as children of God above all things. The gospel is true. The church is true. It is true. It has issues. It has mistakes. It has holes and gaps and problems, and it's run by people. And it is large, and it's a big bureaucracy right now. And it's different. You can't see everything all the time. The brethren can't see everything all the time. You need to have some personal responsibility to learn judgment and discernment. We're moving into an axial time, axial change, pivot in civilization right now. Everything is changing. Demographics politically are changing. You have people on the left moving to the right. You have people on the right moving to the left. You have war. You have these ideologies that are running very strongly. This is very similar to what you see in these other axial moments in history, which Lehi participated in. You have space exploration. You have pharmaceuticals. You have AI. You have a lot of different things that, you have a lot of different technologies and ideas and movements, right, that are happening and seem to be coalescing right now. And we need to be able to discern between these things. It's our personal responsibility. We can't all just be yes men and yes women listening to what someone says, even a prophet. We need to bring those inside of ourselves and internalize them, these ideas and these words, and we need to be converted. And we need to solidify that with the Spirit. And we need to use our own reason and reason with the Lord whenever we possibly can. It's not going to get easier. So you need to make a decision. Some of you, are you going to break away like some of these other breakaway groups have done? Are you going to lose your testimony? A lot of those are on the right, by the way. Those splinter groups that are out there that a lot of you probably don't even know about are on the right. They end up splintering out and from the church and starting their own movement and their own churches. And if you're on the left, are you going to split away because the church isn't progressive enough for you? What is your relationship like with a Savior? What is your relationship like with your Heavenly Father in your prayer? What is your relationship with your own covenants that you've made? What is your relationship with your own family? Because those are the things that really matter above all things. Anyway, just some thoughts that I had after reading several comments and going through this now for quite some time, over a year now, and focusing on these social issues and getting certain feedback from individuals. I appreciate all of you listening. I appreciate your comments and your feedback. I get so many great messages from individuals. And yes, I get concerns, and I try to address those when I can. And I hope I do. But there's so many of you that are really teach me quite a bit, and have great insights and perspective and testimonies and virtue, and I really do appreciate that feedback that I get. I hope this message helps. We are in this together, and I hope that we can put our arms around each other and move forward with faith and focused on the Savior.